The journey begins. The alarm rang at 5:30 a.m., but Imani Carter was already awake. She had barely slept, not because she was nervous, but because today was the day she had been waiting for. Bags packed, phone charged, itinerary memorized. Everything was ready. She was traveling alone for the first time. Not just anywhere. To New York City, the heart of everything she had ever dreamed of. Imani, 17 years old, had been accepted into an exclusive summer program at Columbia University. A full scholarship covered her tuition, room, and board. She had worked so hard for this, countless nights spent studying, perfecting her essays, and pushing past every doubt. She earned this. But flying alone was more than just travel. It was about proving herself, proving to her parents that she was ready for independence, proving to herself that she belonged among the best and brightest. Her mother had spent the night worrying. Don't talk to strangers. Don't take anything from anyone. Keep your phone on loud. Her father, Malcolm Carter, had been calmer. You'll be fine, baby girl. Just be aware of your surroundings. Imani nodded, reassuring them both, but she knew her father's calmness came with experience. He knew how the world worked. He was a corporate attorney, a man who had spent decades fighting battles in boardrooms and courtrooms. He had taught Imani how to carry herself, how to navigate spaces where people might doubt her, how to hold her ground. And yet neither of them could have predicted what was about to happen. The car ride to Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport was quiet, except for the occasional reminder from her father. If anything happens, call me. No hesitation. I got this, Dad. He looked at her through the rearview mirror, his expression unreadable. I know you do. At the airport drop-off, he gave her a firm hug. Call me when you get through security. I will. She pulled her suitcase into the terminal, heart pounding with excitement. This was it. The airport was a sea of motion. Business travelers rushing, families saying goodbye, announcements echoing overhead. Imani followed the signs to the Delta Airlines counter, checked in, and breathed a sigh of relief when she received her boarding pass. Everything was going smoothly. Through TSA security, no problem. She removed her shoes, placed her bag on the belt, and walked through the scanner. The officer barely glanced at her. A win. She grabbed a coffee from a nearby cafe, found her gate, and sat by the window. Her flight to JFK was still an hour away. She pulled out her book and let herself relax. She was doing this. But then, everything changed. A man in uniform approached. Tall, mid-40s, an airport employee, not TSA. His ID badge swayed as he walked toward her. His face was unreadable, but there was something in his eyes, something cold. "Excuse me, miss," he said, voice clipped. "May I see your boarding pass and ID?" Imani blinked, confused but compliant. "Sure, here you go." She handed him her documents. He barely glanced at them before his gaze returned to her. "Where are you headed?" "New York." "Purpose of travel?" "I'm attending a summer program at Columbia University." His eyes flickered, assessing her. "Who purchased your ticket?" Imani felt a flicker of unease. "My father." "Are your parents traveling with you?" She frowned. "No, I'm traveling alone. But I don't see how that's relevant." That was the wrong thing to say. His face hardened, like he was waiting for her to slip up. "Are you sure you can afford this trip?" The words hit like a slap. "Excuse me. You're traveling alone, to New York, for a university program. That's quite an expensive trip for someone your age." Her stomach twisted. Was he seriously questioning whether she could afford her own ticket? "My father bought it. If you check your system, you'll see that it's paid for." The man didn't respond. Instead, he turned his head slightly and made a subtle gesture toward another staff member. A woman in her 30s, blonde hair pulled into a tight bun, approached. "Something wrong?" she asked the man, but her eyes were locked on Imani. "She claims she's traveling alone." "Claims." Imani's fingers curled into fists. "I'm not claiming anything. I have my ticket, my ID. I checked in already. What's the issue? The woman ignored her. Has she been flagged? The man shook his head. No, but I have concerns. Concerns. Imani's pulse pounded in her ears. People were watching now. She could feel their stares. Whispers. She inhaled deeply, forcing herself to keep her voice even. I don't understand. I haven't done anything wrong. The woman sighed, crouching slightly, like she was speaking to a lost child. Honey, we just need to verify some things. Can you step over here for a moment? Something snapped inside her. No. The word hung in the air. The man's face darkened. You can either cooperate or we can call security. Your choice. A knot formed in her throat. She had seen this before. On the news. In viral videos. A situation like this never ended well. People were staring, waiting to see what would happen next. She felt like she was being put on display, like a warning. The power imbalance was suffocating. So she did the only thing she could. She stood up, and as she grabbed her bag, she caught the eye of an older woman sitting across from her. The woman shook her head slightly, her lips pressed tight. She knew. They all knew. But no one said a word. Not yet. Cornered and questioned. Imani felt the weight of every pair of eyes in the waiting area as she followed the two airport staff members. The woman in the tight bun walked slightly ahead, while the man who had first questioned her trailed behind. It felt strategic, like they were flanking her. Her fingers tightened around the handle of her carry-on. Her heart pounded in her chest. They led her away from the main seating area, past the bustling crowd of travelers, and toward a section of the terminal that felt eerily quiet. A row of empty chairs lined the wall, but the energy of the space was different. This was not a waiting area. This was a place where they took people to be questioned, a place where eyes stopped watching. Wait here, the woman said, gesturing toward one of the chairs. Why? Imani asked, her voice even but tense. The man exhaled sharply, as if she was being difficult. We just need to confirm a few things. Like what? Just some routine checks. Routine. That was a lie. Imani knew better. She had checked in properly. She had passed TSA security. She had done nothing wrong. And yet here she was, being treated as if her presence alone was suspicious. She sat down slowly, refusing to slump, refusing to let her posture betray the frustration rising inside her like a storm. The woman knelt slightly, keeping her voice sickly sweet. This will just take a moment, sweetie. We have to ensure all our passengers are safe. Imani stared at her, unimpressed. I'm not a security threat. I have my ID. I have my ticket. I checked in hours ago. The woman's expression didn't change. We understand. But you are traveling alone, and there are certain protocols in place for unaccompanied minors. I'm not an unaccompanied minor, Imani interrupted. I'm 17. I don't need special clearance. The man behind her crossed his arms. His voice was sharper. Then why are you so defensive? That hit differently. She clenched her fists. Because you pulled me out of my flight boarding area for no reason. I didn't see you questioning the other teens flying alone. The man's jaw tightened. Look, we can resolve this quickly, or we can escalate it. It's up to you. There it was. The threat. Imani exhaled slowly, forcing herself to stay calm. Her father's voice echoed in her mind. Stay calm, baby girl. They expect you to get angry. They expect you to lose your composure. Don't give them what they want. So she bit her tongue. What exactly do you want to confirm? She asked. The woman smiled. Just a few things. What's your full name? Imani Carter. Date of birth. July 8th, 2007. And your reason for travel? I already told you. I'm attending a summer program at Columbia University. The man leaned against the counter, watching her closely. Who booked your ticket? My father, Malcolm Carter. The woman's eyes flickered slightly. Malcolm Carter, she repeated, as if recognizing the name. Good. She should. Her father was not just some man. He was a high-profile attorney with an undefeated record in discrimination cases. If they had any sense, they'd end this right now. But they didn't. Instead, the man pulled out a walkie-talkie, speaking into it in a low voice. We need verification on a minor traveling alone. Name: Imani Carter. Ticket purchased by a Malcolm Carter. Cross-check for any travel restrictions. Imani's nails dug into her palms. Travel restrictions. What were they even suggesting? That her ticket was fraudulent. That her father had trafficked her. The absurdity of it made her sick. This is ridiculous, she muttered. The woman sighed. It's just a precaution, honey. Stop calling me that. The woman's fake smile finally cracked. We need to be thorough. Just sit tight, and we'll be done soon. Imani checked her phone. No service. They had led her to a part of the airport with bad reception. Convenient. Her father's number was at the top of her recent calls. She needed to reach him, because something told her this wasn't going to end quickly. Minutes dragged on. A security officer arrived, a man in a Navy uniform, earpiece in, expression unreadable. He walked over and whispered something to the male airport staff member. Imani saw the way their eyes shifted toward her, like they were deciding something. The woman sighed and straightened up. All right, Miss Carter, we're going to need you to come with us for further questioning. No. Her breath caught. For what? You have been flagged for irregular travel activity. Her stomach dropped. What does that even mean? It means we need to confirm the validity of your ticket and verify your guardian's information. Follow me. Imani's ears buzzed. She wasn't stupid. She knew what this was. They didn't believe she belonged here. A black girl traveling alone, in first class, on a direct flight to NYC. It didn't matter that her father was a respected attorney. It didn't matter that she had worked for years to earn her spot in the program. They saw her, and they assumed she was out of place. And now, they were trying to remove her. She tightened her grip on her bag. I want to call my father. The man exhaled impatiently. You can do that after we get to the office. Imani shook her head. No. Now. The security officer stepped forward. Miss Carter, I suggest you don't make this difficult. Difficult. That word. That word. It was the same one they used in every viral video. Every time they tried to justify dragging someone away, arresting them, humiliating them in front of the world. Imani's chest tightened. This was happening. She was about to be escorted away like a criminal for daring to exist in this space. She needed to do something. Now. The moment everything changed. Just as the officer reached for her arm, a new voice cut through the tension. I'd rethink that if I were you. The room shifted. A tall, broad-shouldered man in a perfectly tailored suit stepped forward. His deep brown eyes locked onto the officer, cold and calculating. Imani's heart jumped. Dad. Malcolm Carter was here. And he was not alone. Beside him stood another man, younger, in business casual. He held a leather folder in one hand and a smartphone in the other, recording. The airport staff suddenly looked less confident. The security officer stepped back slightly. Imani felt the shift. Her father was here, and they weren't in control anymore. The reckoning begins. The moment her father walked into the room, the energy shifted. No more whispered conversations between the staff. No more subtle glances exchanged between the airport personnel. No more games. Malcolm Carter's presence wasn't loud. He didn't raise his voice or make a scene, but there was something about the way he carried himself that demanded immediate attention. A controlled storm, one that could unleash at any moment. And right now, he was staring directly at the security officer who had nearly grabbed his daughter. I'd rethink that if I were you, he repeated, his voice even. The officer's hand dropped from Imani's arm like it had burned him. Silence suffocated the room. The younger man beside Malcolm, a legal associate from his firm, tapped something on his phone, still recording. "Mr. Carter," the female airport manager finally spoke, stepping forward with a forced smile. "I assure you, this is all just a misunderstanding." Malcolm turned his gaze to her, his expression unreadable. "A misunderstanding." His voice was calm, too calm. A man he had seen that look before, in court, when he was dismantling opponents with nothing but logic and precision. The woman hesitated. "We were just verifying some travel details." Malcolm tilted his head slightly, as if considering her words. Then, in one smooth motion, he turned to Imani, placed a steady hand on her shoulder, and said, "Are you okay?" Imani swallowed hard, nodding. But was she okay? Her hand still shook slightly. Her chest was still tight. The frustration, the humiliation, the anger still simmered beneath her skin. She should have been boarding her flight by now, excited, nervous, but free. Instead, she had spent the last half hour being treated like a criminal. And her father knew it. Malcolm exhaled, turning back toward the staff. "I want someone to explain, clearly and concisely, why my daughter was removed from her gate, questioned like a suspect, and denied access to her flight. And before you answer," he motioned to the young associate, who was now flipping open a leather folder filled with documents. "Understand that anything you say now will be documented for legal purposes." The room tensed. The female manager's smile faltered. The male staff member, the one who had first questioned Imani, shifted uncomfortably. The security officer cleared his throat. "Sir, there were concerns." "Concerns based on what?" Malcolm interrupted smoothly. The officer hesitated. "She was traveling alone. So are hundreds of minors every day. She had a first-class ticket, which was legally purchased under her name, correct?" No response. Malcolm took a slow step forward. "And yet you flagged her for additional questioning, pulled her away from the gate, made her feel as though she had done something wrong. Why?" The female manager attempted to salvage the situation. "Mr. Carter, please understand, we have protocols in place for unaccompanied minors." Malcolm raised a single hand, stopping her mid-sentence. "That's an interesting claim, because while I was waiting at the terminal, I personally observed 2 other minors, both young white girls, also traveling alone. Neither of them were pulled aside. Neither of them were questioned. Neither of them were treated like a potential threat." Silence. Imani felt the shift. They all knew exactly what was happening. And now, with her father standing here, calling them out on it, they weren't in control anymore. The young legal associate let out a quiet chuckle, shaking his head. "You people never learn," he muttered under his breath. The female manager's face reddened. "Sir, I assure you, race had nothing to do with this." "Then what did?" Malcolm pressed. The manager opened her mouth, closed it again. "She had nothing." The crowd speaks up. Behind them, the bystanders were watching. Passengers who had seen the whole thing. People who had whispered among themselves when Imani was taken away. And now, they weren't staying silent. A woman in a blazer stood up from her seat. "Excuse me," she called out, stepping forward. "I was sitting near the gate the entire time. I saw everything. That young lady did absolutely nothing wrong." A middle-aged man, still holding his laptop, nodded. "Yeah, I fly out of this airport every week, and I've never seen a kid pulled aside like that. This was targeted." A younger man, a college student, probably, lifted his phone. "I recorded everything." Imani's chest tightened. People had noticed. They had seen what happened, and they weren't ignoring it. The airport manager's expression tightened. She was losing control of the situation. Good. The threat of legal action. The young legal associate flipped a page in his folder. "Mr. Carter," he said, tapping a document, "would you like me to draft an official complaint to the airline and the Federal Aviation Administration, citing racial discrimination and unlawful detainment of a minor. The manager's eyes widened. "That won't be necessary," she said quickly. Malcolm raised a brow. "Oh, so suddenly this is all a misunderstanding." The staff members looked at each other. They knew. They had messed up. Malcolm took another step forward, his voice deadly calm. "Here's what's going to happen. My daughter is getting back on her flight. She will not be harassed again. She will receive an official apology from this airport before she lands. And," he placed a business card on the table, tapping it once, "your legal team will be in contact with my office. We will be reviewing your so-called protocols, and if I find any evidence of racial profiling, this will not end with a conversation." The room felt stifling. The security officer swallowed hard. The manager nodded stiffly. "Understood, sir." Malcolm exhaled slowly, then turned back to Imani. "Are you ready to go?" She nodded. Her father gave her one last reassuring squeeze on her shoulder. Then they walked out of the room. The aftermath. By the time Imani reached her gate, the whispers hadn't stopped. But they weren't about her. They were about the airport staff. People were angry. People were recording. This wasn't just an incident. It was a story that was going to spread. As she settled into her first-class seat, her phone buzzed. A text from her dad. "Proud of you. Call me when you land." She exhaled slowly, letting the words sink in. Then, another buzz. This time, a notification from social media. She tapped it open. The video of her being pulled aside. It was going viral. Thousands of shares, hundreds of comments. People calling out the airport. People telling their own stories. People demanding change. Imani gripped her phone tightly. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about all of them. And maybe, just maybe, change was finally coming. The story goes viral. Imani leaned back in her first-class seat, staring at her phone screen. The words "proud of you, call me when you land" from her father still lingered in her mind, but another message had completely taken over her focus. Her heart pounded as she scrolled through the comments under the video. The video. It had already racked up thousands of shares. The clip, the moment she had been pulled aside, interrogated, and escorted away like a suspect, was spreading like wildfire. People were angry. People were watching. People were listening. She swiped down to refresh the feed. The numbers had jumped again. 100,000 views. And climbing. A lump formed in her throat. This was so much bigger than her now. Comments flooding in. Some of the top comments made her heart tighten. "This happens way too often. I'm so glad someone is calling it out." She was literally just sitting there, waiting for her flight. What protocol justifies this? I fly alone all the time, and I've never been questioned like this. We all know why they targeted her. I was 16 when this happened to me. No one helped me. Watching this makes me so emotional. That father's a legend. The way they folded when he arrived. Iconic. Imani's throat felt tight. She had been so alone in that moment. But now she realized, so many people had been through the same thing. And worse, some had gone through it with no one to back them up. She clenched her fists. No, this couldn't just be another viral moment that people got upset about and then forgot. It had to mean something. Her phone buzzed with a new notification. Her best friend, Nia, had just sent a text. "Incoming call. Nia." Imani didn't hesitate. She picked up instantly. "Girl, are you okay?" Nia's voice came through, sharp with concern. "Yeah." Imani exhaled. "I'm on the plane now." "I saw the video, Imani. Everyone has. It's everywhere." "I know. It's insane. Insane. It's ANFURATANE. The way they treated you. The way that guy looked at you, like you didn't belong. I swear, I wanted to throw my phone across the room." Imani closed her eyes. She could hear the frustration in Nia's voice. "I'm just glad my dad showed up," she admitted. "If he hadn't." She didn't finish the sentence, because they both knew what could have happened. Nia exhaled sharply. "Your dad is taa. The way he walked in there, ready to shut it all down. He's a superhero." Imani smiled weakly. "Yeah, he doesn't play. And now everyone is talking about it. This isn't just local news, Imani. It's national. I saw people tagging news stations. Journalists are picking it up. Even celebrities are reposting it." Imani's stomach flipped. "Wait. What?" "Check Twitter, girl." Her hands trembled slightly as she opened the app. And sure enough, there it was. Her name. Her video. Trending. The public outcry. She scrolled through her notifications, and her jaw dropped. A famous activist had retweeted the video with the caption, "This is what flying while black looks like. Enough is enough." A civil rights attorney had shared it, adding, "Legal action needs to be taken. Who's handling this case?" A Grammy-winning artist had commented, "Imagine being 17, just trying to catch your flight, and getting treated like a criminal. Sick." Even a well-known journalist had written, "Airline policies must be examined. Racial profiling disguised as security measures cannot continue." Imani's fingers hovered over the screen. She wasn't sure how to process this. This wasn't just a bad experience anymore. This was a movement. The airline responds. Her phone buzzed again. A news notification. She clicked it. Breaking and egalios. Delta Airlines issues official statement after viral video sparks outrage. Her breath caught in her throat as she read the statement. Delta Airlines is committed to providing a safe and welcoming environment for all travelers. We take these concerns seriously and are launching an internal review of our staff's handling of this situation. We sincerely apologize to Miss Carter and her family for any distress this may have caused. Imani let out a short, humorless laugh. An internal review. They weren't sorry. They were scrambling for cover. And the worst part, if this video hadn't gone viral, they wouldn't have apologized at all. Her jaw tightened. She was done letting them control the narrative. She switched to her camera app, staring at herself in the front-facing view. Then she hit record. Imani speaks out. "Hey, everyone," she began, her voice steady. "I didn't expect to go viral today. But if this story is being shared, I want to make sure the message is clear." She took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. "This isn't just about me. It's about every kid who's ever been made to feel like they don't belong. Every traveler who's been profiled for no reason. Every person who has been singled out and humiliated because of the color of their skin." She leaned forward slightly, making sure her voice carried weight. "If my dad hadn't shown up, I don't know how far they would have taken this. And that's terrifying, because so many people do and to have someone to back them up. So many people just get kicked off their flights, arrested, mistreated, and no one ever hears about it." She paused, letting that truth sink in. "So to Delta Airlines and every other airline that allows this to happen, I don't want your apology. I want CHANG. I want policies rewritten. I want employees held accountable. I want real consequences for racial profiling." She exhaled, meeting her own gaze in the camera. "And I won't stop talking about it until that happens." She hit post, and within seconds, the views started climbing again. A new battle begins. The flight attendants announce takeoff. Imani looked out the window, watching the airport disappear beneath her as the plane lifted into the sky. Her world had changed in just a few hours. And now, she wasn't just a girl traveling to a summer program anymore. She was part of something bigger. She had a voice, and the world was finally listening. The fire spreads. The roar of the plane's engines vibrated beneath Imani's seat, but her mind was racing faster than the aircraft itself. She watched her phone screen as the numbers skyrocketed. The video she had just posted, her direct response to the situation, had already racked up 50,000 views in minutes. It wasn't slowing down. Her words were reaching people. And the more she read through the comments, the more she realized something. This wasn't just her fight anymore. More stories poured in. As her video spread, people started sharing their own experiences. This happened to my brother last year. He was flying alone for college orientation and got pulled off his flight for suspicious behavior. He missed his flight, and the airline refused to refund him. My mom is a flight attendant, and she says she's seen this happen so many times. It's disgusting, and the airlines know exactly what they're doing. I work in aviation security, and I can tell you firsthand, this isn't a protocol issue. This is racial bias, plain and simple. Imagine a white 17-year-old girl in first class being treated like this. Yeah, didn't think so. Imani bit her lip, staring at the flood of messages. She knew this kind of thing happened. But seeing so many people coming forward, sharing their own stories of injustice, it hit differently. This wasn't an isolated incident. This was a pattern. And now, the world was watching it unfold in real time. A storm is brewing. Her phone buzzed aggressively. A new text from her dad. Dad, we need to talk when you land. Things are moving fast. Her stomach twisted slightly. Fast. She refreshed her notifications, and her jaw nearly dropped. A major news outlet had just posted an article. Vivar e King. Delta Airlines under fire after viral video. Shows teen pulled from flight without cause. National news. Her hand started to shake as she clicked on the article. The news reports begin. The article laid everything out in cold, hard facts. Imani Carter, a 17-year-old student, was pulled from her flight for questioning without cause. She had all her proper documentation. She had already passed TSA security. Yet she was detained. Airport staff claimed it was a routine check, but eyewitness accounts and video footage show clear racial bias in their treatment. Her father, Malcolm Carter, renowned attorney, arrived and demanded an explanation. The airport backed down. Now, legal experts are calling for an investigation into racial profiling in air travel. The article ended with a statement from the airline. We are aware of the situation and are currently conducting an internal review. Delta Airlines is committed to inclusivity and the fair treatment of all passengers. Imani let out a frustrated laugh. Committed to inclusivity. They were scrambling. They knew this was blowing up, and they had no control over the narrative anymore. Legal experts speak out. As she scrolled, she saw more legal professionals weighing in. This is a textbook case of discrimination. If the Carters file a lawsuit, Delta is in serious trouble. Airlines have gotten away with this for too long. There needs to be a federal review of racial bias in security policies. Mr. Carter handled this perfectly. He documented everything. If they don't make changes, this could cost them millions. Imani exhaled sharply. She wasn't just a girl going viral. She was at the center of a national debate. And it was getting bigger by the minute. A call that changes everything. Her phone buzzed again. Incoming call. Dad. She took a steadying breath and answered. Hey, Dad. You doing okay? His voice was calm, but she could hear the underlying tension. Yeah, just processing everything. Her father paused. It's about to get bigger, baby girl. Bigger how? I just got off the phone with some civil rights organizations. They want to take action. Publicly. Imani's eyes widened. Wait, what does that mean? It means this isn't just about you anymore. There's talk of a formal lawsuit against Delta. Possibly even a congressional hearing on racial profiling in air travel. Her head spun. A lawsuit. A congressional hearing. Dad, I didn't expect this to get so huge. Neither did they, he said. That's why they're panicking. Imani ran a hand over her face. I just wanted to get on my flight. I know, he said softly. And that's the point. You shouldn't have had to fight for something that should have been a basic right. She swallowed hard. So what happens next? There was a long pause. That's up to you, Imani. Her breath hitched. What do you mean? We can push this as far as you want to go, he said. If you want to step back and let the legal teams handle it, we will. But if you want to speak up, on your terms, people are listening. She felt the weight of that choice settle onto her shoulders. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about everyone this had ever happened to. She stared at her phone, at the endless flood of messages, support, and calls for justice. And then she knew. I want to speak up. Her father didn't hesitate. Then we do it right. We take control of the narrative. We demand change. Imani's chest tightened. But not with fear. With determination. Let's do it. The flight lands. A new fight begins. As the plane descended into New York City, she knew she wasn't just stepping into a summer program anymore. She was stepping into something bigger. She wasn't just another passenger who had been mistreated. She was about to become a voice for change. And this was only the beginning. Stepping into the spotlight. The moment the plane touched down at JFK Airport, Imani knew her life had changed. Not because she had just arrived in one of the most iconic cities in the world, but because the world was waiting for her. As she looked out of the small airplane window, the New York skyline stretched before her, vast, powerful, and unshakable. Kind of like how she felt right now. Her phone hadn't stopped buzzing the entire flight. Text messages, Twitter mentions, news articles. She had tried to rest, but every time she closed her eyes, the reality of what was happening came rushing back. She was no longer just a 17-year-old girl traveling alone. She was now the face of a movement. And she had a choice to make. Airport security awaits. As soon as she unbuckled her seatbelt, the flight attendant approached her seat. Miss Carter, the woman asked, her voice cautious. Imani's chest tightened. Yes, there are some people waiting for you at the gate. Imani frowned. What kind of people? The woman hesitated. Airport security. And some media personnel. Her stomach flipped. She wasn't surprised. Of course, the airport wasn't going to just let her walk out unnoticed. Not after what had happened. Not after the entire country had seen how they had treated her. She took a slow breath and straightened her shoulders. Okay. She was ready for this. She had to be. The walk through JFK. The moment Imani stepped off the plane and into the jet bridge, she felt the eyes on her. 2 uniformed airport security officers were waiting, along with a woman in a dark business suit, probably some kind of airline representative. The woman immediately plastered on a fake smile. Miss Carter, welcome to New York. We'd like to escort you safely through the airport. Imani's eyes narrowed. Why? Am I under investigation? The woman's smile faltered. Of course not. We just want to ensure your comfort and... No, you want to control the situation. Silence. She could see it on their faces. They wanted to contain this. They wanted to keep her quiet. Too late. Imani kept walking, rushing past them without another word. The security officers fell into step behind her. They weren't stopping her, but they wanted to make sure she didn't do anything that they couldn't control. Too bad for them. She had already made her choice, and her voice would not be silenced. The media frenzy. As soon as she stepped into the main terminal, chaos erupted. Photographers, reporters, people holding out their phones, recording her every step. The questions came fast and loud. Imani, do you plan to sue Delta Airlines? Do you think this was a case of racial profiling? How does it feel to be at the center of a national conversation? What do you want to say to other young black travelers? Imani's pulse pounded. She had never been in front of this many cameras before. She had never been put in the center of something this huge. But she had to remember, this wasn't about her. This was about every person who had been through this. This was about the people who didn't have a father like hers to back them up. This was about justice. She stopped walking, turned toward the cameras, and she spoke. Imani's first public statement. I never planned to go viral. The crowd quieted as her voice rang out, clear and strong. I never planned to be here, standing in front of all of you, talking about this. I just wanted to get on my flight. I just wanted to go to my summer program. But instead, I was treated like a criminal, like I didn't belong. She let that sink in. And the worst part, this isn't new. This isn't the first time this has happened to someone like me. It's just the first time it got caught on camera and shared with the world. The reporters scribbled notes furiously. The cameras zoomed in. She exhaled slowly. I don't want an apology from Delta Airlines. I don't want a free flight. I want real change. I want airlines to be held accountable. I want policies that prevent racial profiling from happening in the first place. Because next time, it might not be caught on camera. And next time, someone might not have a father like mine to step in and fight for them. The reporters shouted more questions. Are you going to sue? What do you say to people who claim this wasn't racial profiling? Imani didn't hesitate. If this wasn't racial profiling, then why did I get pulled aside when others didn't? Why was I questioned about my ticket when others weren't? Why was I treated like a suspect for simply sitting at my gate? She looked directly into the nearest camera. I know what this was, and so do you. Silence. Then, an explosion of camera flashes and voices. But Imani was done. She had said what she needed to say. And now, she had a flight to catch. She turned on her heel and walked away, leaving the chaos behind her. A call from the White House. By the time Imani made it to baggage claim, her phone buzzed again. Incoming call. Dad. She picked up. You handled that perfectly, her father's voice said, filled with pride. Thanks, Dad. There's something else, he said, his voice shifting. I just got off the phone with a contact in Washington. Imani froze. Washington. The White House, baby girl, they want to talk to you. Her heart stopped. Talk to me about what? About racial profiling in travel. About working on new policies. About making sure this never happens again. She couldn't breathe. She had thought she was just a girl trying to catch a flight. But now, she was about to change the system. Her grip tightened around her phone. Tell them I'm ready to talk. This was just the beginning. As she stepped out of JFK, the bright lights of New York City surrounded her. She had come here to attend a summer program. Instead, she had stepped into a revolution. And she wasn't backing down. Not now. Not ever. The fight for change. Imani stood outside JFK Airport, the cool New York air brushing against her face. Just a day ago, she had been a normal 17-year-old girl excited about traveling alone for the first time. Now she was standing at the center of a national movement. Her phone buzzed. Again. New notification. White House official requests meeting on racial profiling in air travel. Her chest tightened. This was real. This was happening. And she wasn't going to back down. She took a deep breath, steadied herself, and stepped into the waiting black car that her father had arranged. It was time to take this fight all the way to the top. The meeting of a lifetime. The next morning, Imani found herself standing in front of a massive glass building in downtown Manhattan. Inside, a group of civil rights lawyers, activists, and political leaders were waiting for her. Her father stood beside her, dressed sharply in his navy blue suit, his face unreadable. You ready for this, baby girl? He asked, looking at her with pride. Imani took a breath. Yeah, I am. They walked into the conference room, where powerful figures sat around a long mahogany table. At the head of the table was a White House representative, flanked by legal experts and policy advisors. The moment she sat down, the questions began. Imani, we want to hear directly from you. What do you think needs to change? She leaned forward, planting her hands on the table. Everything. Silence. All eyes were on her. So she spoke her truth. Imani's proposal for change. Airlines need to be held accountable for racial profiling. They can't keep hiding behind security measures when what they're really doing is targeting black and brown travelers. One of the officials nodded. And how do you suggest we do that? First, we need a Passenger Rights Act that protects people from racial discrimination at airports. That means mandatory bias training for all airline employees and TSA officers. Not once a year, every single month. A few people scribbled notes. Imani continued. Second, if an airline pulls a passenger aside for additional screening, there needs to be documentation, an official record of why they were stopped. That way, they can't just make excuses later. The White House rep leaned forward. You're asking for a major policy shift. Are you prepared to fight for it? Imani didn't hesitate. Absolutely. Her father gave a proud nod beside her. The official sighed, exchanging glances with the others. We'll take this into serious consideration. Imani locked eyes with him. No, you'll do more than that. You'll act. Because if you don't, I promise you, this won't go away. Another heavy silence. Then, slowly, the official smiled. You remind me of your father. Imani sat back. I remind you of myself. And with that, the meeting ended. But the fight had only just begun. The public stands behind her. By the time Imani stepped out of the meeting, the world was waiting. Journalists, activists, supporters holding signs with her name. She hadn't even spoken yet, but the crowd erupted into cheers. People chanted her name. I am Ani. I am Ani. I am Ani. Her throat tightened. This wasn't just about her anymore. This was about all of them. She took the microphone that someone handed her and faced the crowd. This fight isn't over. It's just beginning. The crowd roared. She raised a fist in the air. No more silent discrimination. No more excuses. We demand change, and we're not stopping until we get it. The cheers shook the streets. Imani stepped back, breathless. She had started as a girl just trying to catch her flight. Now she was leading a revolution, and nothing would stop her now. 1 year later, a legacy in motion. 1 year after that moment, everything had changed. The Carter Anti-Profiling Passenger Rights Act had passed in Congress. Airlines were now required to track and report all additional screenings. A major class action lawsuit had forced Delta Airlines and several other companies to pay out millions in settlements to travelers who had been unfairly detained. Imani Carter had become one of the youngest civil rights advocates in modern history. She had been invited to speak at universities, on talk shows, even at the United Nations. But no matter how big things got, she always remembered one thing. This fight had started because she refused to be silent. And she never would be again. Final scene. Imani's future. As she stood on stage at Columbia University, speaking to a packed auditorium, she looked out at the young students in the audience. Future lawyers, future activists, future leaders. She smiled. If you ever find yourself in a situation where you feel unheard, remember this. Your voice is the most powerful weapon you have. Use it. Applause thundered through the room. She had changed the world. And she was just getting started. The final battle. The days following her speech at Columbia University were a whirlwind. Imani barely had time to process what had happened before she was swept into meetings, interviews, and legal discussions. Every major news outlet wanted a piece of the story. Every activist group wanted her to speak at their events. Every airline CEO was scrambling to issue apologies and promises of change. But she wasn't interested in apologies anymore. She wanted action. The lawsuit that shook the industry. Just a few months after the incident at the airport, Malcolm Carter, along with a team of civil rights attorneys, filed a federal lawsuit against Delta Airlines. The charges? Racial discrimination, unlawful detainment of a minor, violation of consumer protection laws. The airline tried to settle quietly. They offered millions to make the lawsuit go away. Imani refused. "I'm not doing this for a payout. I'm doing this so it doesn't happen again." Her father had smiled at that. "That's my girl." Instead of accepting a settlement, she fought. She took the case to court. And she won. The Carter Reform Act becomes law. Her victory in court sent shockwaves through the airline industry. But it wasn't enough. Imani wanted policy changes, and with the help of lawyers, activists, and politicians who supported her fight, she helped draft and push forward a bill in Congress. Mandatory bias training for all airline employees, legal consequences for racial profiling at airports, strict reporting requirements for additional screenings, passengers' right to immediate legal counsel if detained without cause. The bill passed with overwhelming support. It was called the Carter Anti-Profiling Passenger Rights Act, named after her. For the first time in history, a 17-year-old girl had helped change federal law. And she wasn't done yet. Imani's final message to the world. 1 year later, Imani Carter stood in front of the United Nations, looking out at a room filled with world leaders, activists, and young people who had been inspired by her fight. She took a breath and spoke her truth one last time. 1 year ago, I was just a girl trying to board a plane. 1 year ago, I was treated like a criminal for no reason. But I refused to let my story be forgotten. And because of that, we changed the system. The audience sat in complete silence, hanging on to her every word. This isn't just about me. This is about every person who has been told they don't belong. Every person who has been stopped, questioned, or humiliated just for existing in a space they have every right to be in. This is about justice. This is about change. And this is just the beginning. The applause thundered through the hall. People stood, cheered. And at the back of the room, her father wiped a tear from his eye. She had done it. She had taken her pain and turned it into power. She had taken an injustice and turned it into change. She was no longer just a girl who had been wronged. She was a leader, a fighter, a symbol of hope, and the world would never forget her name. Epilogue, a legacy that lasts. Years later, people would still tell the story of Imani Carter. How a teenage girl stood up to an airline, fought back against racial discrimination, and rewrote history. Her story would be taught in schools, studied in law classes, and remembered by every traveler who stepped onto a plane without fear of being profiled. Because she had fought for them. Because she had never backed down. And because she had proved, once and for all, that one voice can change the world.